I was 68 years old when I discovered my son-in-law's leather-bound diary hidden behind loose bricks in my basement. Today is the day, the final entry read, dated that very morning. The old man won't make it past dinner. The insurance money will set us up for life. My hands trembled as I turned to the previous pages, each one revealing a carefully planned murder plot spanning months. My own daughter Sarah had signed as witness to a $2 million life insurance policy just last week. The basement stairs creaked above me, and I heard his footsteps entering the house. Through the small window, I saw his car parked next to my daughter's, both home hours earlier than usual. The diary in my hands suddenly felt as heavy as the truth it contained, but it wasn't the only secret that basement held. Before we continue, if you've ever sensed danger from someone you trusted, if you've ever felt that chill of realizing your family might wish you harm, leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear what happens next. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story will show you exactly how fate protects those who protect themselves. My name is Robert Anderson, and I spent 40 years building the largest independent pharmacy chain in our state. Not a fancy corporate operation, but family-owned stores where people could afford their medications and find a friendly face behind the counter. After losing my wife Margaret to cancer 5 years ago, I poured everything into supporting Sarah and her new husband James, a charming young doctor who seemed too perfect from the very start. I thought my generosity had bought their love. But that morning, as I stood in my basement holding proof of their murderous intentions, I remembered the other thing hidden behind those loose bricks. Margaret's final gift to me, a secret that would turn their perfect plan into their perfect nightmare. That evening, as I heard them preparing what would have been my last meal, I clutched both the diary and my wife's hidden package close to my chest. James had no idea that his carefully documented murder plot would never succeed, or that his own words would soon destroy everything he and my daughter had planned. But to understand how we reached this moment of betrayal and survival, we need to go back. Back to the day my daughter first brought home the man who thought he could write my death into his story. I opened my first pharmacy when I was 25, fresh out of school with a license and dreams bigger than my bank account. Margaret worked as a nurse at the county hospital then, bringing me lunch in her white uniform, always saying the smell of medicine and hope reminded her of saving lives. We started small, just me behind a single counter in a rented storefront, but Margaret believed in me with the kind of faith that moves mountains. Every prescription you fill helps someone heal, sleep, live, she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. Over 4 decades, Anderson Family Pharmacies grew from that tiny shop into the largest independent chain in the state. Not the fanciest stores, but places where customers knew they'd get honest advice and fair prices. Margaret kept our books with the same careful attention she gave her patients, teaching me about business management while I taught her about drug interactions and dosages. Together we built something solid, something that mattered. One memory stands clearer than all others, bright as morning sunlight through amber pill bottles. Sarah was 10, and I was teaching her to count tablets in the back room after closing time. Margaret brought us hot chocolate in paper cups, the steam rising like hope in the winter air. The evening carried the mixed scents of alcohol swabs and her favorite vanilla perfume. "Show me again, Daddy," Sarah said, her small hands careful with the counting tray, her eyes focused beneath the safety glasses I'd bought her special. Margaret took a photo of that moment, father and daughter bent over the counter, matching white coats, pure joy on our faces. That picture still sits on my office desk, though the colors have faded like so many things since she left us. The cancer came swiftly when Sarah was in college, aggressive and unstoppable. Margaret faced it with the same quiet strength she brought to everything, making me promise to finish raising our daughter with both love and wisdom. "She'll need both," she whispered in those final days, "because the world has a way of testing what we're made of." The years after losing her became a careful balance of work and solitude. I expanded the business, now operating 15 stores, each one run according to the principles Margaret had helped establish. Sarah graduated medical school, making us both proud, though she chose the glamour of plastic surgery over community healthcare. On quiet evenings, I'd sit in my office, surrounded by the familiar sounds of pharmacy work and customer conversations, talking to Margaret's photo about our daughter's achievements. The silence of widowhood never quite goes away, but I filled it with the rhythm of helping people and the satisfaction of knowing each prescription might ease someone's pain. My customers became family, sharing their lives, their struggles, their victories, trusting me with their health and their stories. It wasn't the same as having Margaret beside me, but it was a different kind of fullness. Life settled into a comfortable pattern of early mornings and honest work. I had my routine: coffee at sunrise, managing the pharmacies during the day, reviewing inventory at night while watching old movies Margaret used to love. Sometimes Sarah would join me for dinner, now wearing designer scrubs but still remembering how to count by fives. We were different people, her with her private practice and me with my community stores, but we understood each other in the way that people who help others do. I thought we had built something unshakable, this father-daughter bond forged in medicine and mutual respect. Then, on a bright spring afternoon, Sarah called with excitement in her voice. "Dad, I met someone special. His name is James Morrison. He's a brilliant neurosurgeon from Boston. Can we come over for dinner tomorrow night? I really want you to meet him." I said yes, of course, eager to share in my daughter's happiness. I didn't know then that I was about to meet the man who would try to turn my own medicine against me, using my love for Sarah as the perfect delivery system for his poison. James Morrison glided into my home like a pharmaceutical sales rep, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. His designer suit probably cost more than a month's inventory at one of my stores, his manicured hands had never counted pills by five, and his smile seemed calculated for maximum effect. "Mr. Anderson," he purred, shaking my hand with the precise pressure taught in medical school, "Sarah tells me you're quite the healthcare pioneer. Small-town pharmacies? How quaint." The way he said quaint made it sound like he was describing an outdated medication. I had spent the afternoon preparing Margaret's special pot roast, setting the table with our best china, the ones we saved for special occasions. Sarah seemed different already, watching James's reaction to everything instead of relaxing in her childhood home. She kept touching her designer watch, something she'd never worn during family dinners before. James walked through my living room like he was conducting a medical inspection, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floors I'd installed with Sarah years ago. "Such interesting choices," he murmured, running a finger along the family photos. "Though I suppose it has a certain old-world charm. Sarah mentioned you're still actively running all the stores? At your age?" The question carried hidden symptoms, like a disease masking itself as something benign. The changes in Sarah became more noticeable as dinner progressed. When I started telling the story of her first day helping in the pharmacy, she quickly changed the subject to James's latest brain surgery. "Dad's stories can get a bit provincial," she said, using words that had never been part of her vocabulary before. James dominated the conversation, dropping names of hospital boards and medical conferences, describing the multimillion-dollar procedures he performed. "Of course," he said, barely touching the pot roast, "in my world we focus on cutting-edge medicine. Not that there's anything wrong with retail pharmacy." Just before dessert, James excused himself to use the bathroom. I heard him opening medicine cabinets and drawers, not even trying to hide his snooping. When he returned, his questions took a calculated turn. "This property must have significant value now with the new medical center nearby. Have you considered selling? Sarah mentioned you're not much for retirement planning." His words dripped sweetness like liquid morphine, but his eyes measured everything like dosages in a fatal prescription. Sarah jumped in before I could respond. "Dad's not interested in selling, James. This is our family home." But the way she said it sounded uncertain, as if she was already seeing the house through his eyes instead of her heart. As they prepared to leave, James paused in the doorway, his smile never reaching his eyes. "We should discuss modernizing your business model, Mr. Anderson. I have connections who could transform it into a proper corporate chain. Maybe make it more competitive for when Sarah takes over." After they left, I sat in my home office, running my hands over Margaret's old prescription pad holder, the one she'd used during her hospital rounds. The air still smelled of home-cooked meals and family memories, but something else lingered now, an unsettling scent like antiseptic covering decay. Sarah had left her old white coat hanging in the hall, something she'd never done before. It sat there like a small sign that things were already changing, that my daughter was slowly being reformulated according to someone else's prescription. In the quiet of my office, surrounded by the medical references and pharmacy journals that had helped me keep thousands of families healthy, I couldn't shake the feeling that James Morrison wasn't just changing Sarah's career path. He was systematically dismantling every genuine thing I'd ever built in my daughter's life, starting with her respect for community healthcare and simple values. Like a slow-acting poison, his influence was already showing its first symptoms. The first incident happened at Sarah's medical conference presentation. I had spent weeks preparing a display about our pharmacy's innovative medication management program for low-income patients, wearing my best suit and name tag from the state board. When I arrived at the hotel conference room, the registration desk stopped me. "Service entrance is around back, sir." Before I could explain, James appeared in his tailored suit, his smile tight with embarrassment. "Oh, Mr. Anderson, we thought we mentioned. This is a specialized symposium. Perhaps you could present your retail experiences another time." Sarah stood behind him, adjusting her silk blouse, avoiding my eyes. "Dad, maybe save it for a community health fair?" I drove home with my presentation materials untouched, telling myself they were just maintaining professional standards. That night, I sat in my office, reviewing the patient success stories I'd planned to share, trying to convince myself that good intentions sometimes wore expensive suits. The second cut came during a Sunday afternoon when Sarah usually helped review our charitable prescription program. For 20 years, she'd spent weekends helping elderly patients navigate their medication costs, sharing the values we'd built together. But James announced they had hospital board obligations instead. "Networking is crucial for her career trajectory," he said during a brief phone call. "Sarah needs to mingle with the right medical circles." When I mentioned a longtime patient needed medication counseling, his laugh felt like bitter medicine. "Oh no, Sarah doesn't handle those kinds of cases anymore. We can refer them to a pharmacy technician." Sarah added quickly, "Maybe they can use the discount card program, Dad?" I spent that Sunday alone in my store, counting pills and checking interactions, staring at the empty counseling room where Sarah used to work. I told myself they were building their professional future. But Margaret's voice in my memory whispered that futures built on forgotten odes rarely heal properly. The final wound cut deepest. I had stopped by Sarah's plastic surgery clinic to surprise her with lunch, carrying her favorite chicken soup from the deli where we'd celebrated every career milestone since her graduation. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw my pharmacy coat, prescription pad visible in the pocket. "Pharmaceutical reps use the service elevator, sir." Before I could respond, I heard James's voice around the corner, talking to what sounded like potential patients. "Of course, Sarah comes from a more modest medical background, but she's completely reinvented herself. You'd never know her father still counts pills for a living." My daughter's laugh, agreeing with his words, felt like a wrongly filled prescription burning in my chest. "Dad's old school, still thinks community pharmacy matters." I set the soup on the receptionist's desk and walked out, my comfortable shoes suddenly feeling heavy as lead weights. In my car, I found myself talking to Margaret's memory. "Maybe we raised her wrong, honey. Maybe we should have taught her to value profit margins over patient care." That evening, I stood in my pharmacy, surrounded by the medications and counseling rooms that had always brought me peace. On my phone, social media showed pictures of Sarah and James at medical galas and charity auctions, her arm around his waist, both of them polished to a shine that made my world look dull in comparison. The photos had captions about elevating standards and modern medicine. My daughter, who once took pride in helping elderly patients understand their medications, now posed in designer dresses beside people who thought community pharmacy was beneath them. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles, but in the growing shame she seemed to feel about her roots. I touched the old mortar and pestle Margaret had given me when we opened our first store, wondering if they'd even want these tools when I was gone, or if they'd consider them too outdated for their sophisticated medical world. The pharmacy suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, like a hospital room after the patient leaves, leaving only the scent of antiseptic and fading warmth where life used to pulse. The wedding announcement came on a quiet Sunday evening when Sarah visited my pharmacy unexpectedly. "Dad, James and I are getting married," she said, standing among the familiar shelves and medicine bottles. "We're having an engagement dinner at his family's country club next week." My heart lifted like watching a critical patient's vital signs returning to normal. I spent the following days preparing, getting my best suit cleaned, even buying a new tie that Margaret would have approved of. The country club was the most exclusive place in town, the kind where membership cost more than a year's worth of inventory. But I didn't care about the cost. My daughter was getting married and I had something special planned. In my office safe, wrapped in soft cloth, sat Margaret's antique medical bag, a family heirloom passed down through generations of healthcare workers. Along with it, I had saved $2 million from years of careful business management, money I wanted to give them as a wedding gift. When James called to discuss the dinner details, his voice carried an unusual warmth that made me dare to hope. "We'll seat you at the main table," he said. "Something special to celebrate family." The first warning sign appeared 3 days before the dinner when I stopped by Sarah's clinic to confirm the time. The elevator was under maintenance, so I took the stairs, my comfortable shoes quiet on the carpeted steps. As I reached her floor, I heard James's voice floating through the stairwell door, left slightly ajar. "It's perfect, really. The insurance policy is set. $2 million when the old pharmacist has his accident." I've already adjusted his blood pressure medication. My hand froze on the door handle. The dosage change will look natural, he continued, speaking to someone I couldn't see. A tragic fall down those basement stairs he's always using. Sarah's signature on the policy makes it ironclad. After all, what daughter wouldn't want to ensure her elderly father's future? A woman's laugh joined his, but it wasn't Sarah's. Brilliant plan, brother. Nothing like a grieving daughter inheriting a fortune. And with his reputation for checking inventory alone at night, no one will question it. That evening, I sat in my pharmacy office, staring at Margaret's medical bag, wondering if I'd imagined the whole conversation. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about someone else. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call Sarah, but what would I say? That I'd overheard her fiancé plotting my death? That I was worried about insurance policies and medication changes? She'd think her old father was becoming paranoid. Besides, the way James had laughed. It reminded me of the sound certain medications make when they're being ground into powder. The next day, more details emerged about the dinner. James had invited several prominent doctors, including the county medical examiner. It's tradition, James explained sweetly during his final check-in call. Everyone who matters will be there to witness this union of medical minds. Each word felt like a carefully measured dose of something lethal. The evening of the engagement dinner arrived clear and cool. I stood in my pharmacy, Margaret's medical bag in its velvet box tucked safely in my jacket pocket, the bank check for $2 million folded neatly beside it. Through the window, I watched the sun set behind the shelves where I'd first taught Sarah to respect the power of medicine, where we'd spent countless hours helping people heal. The medications stood neatly arranged on their shelves, each one representing years of trust and care. In a few hours I would walk into the country club, where crystal glasses would sparkle under chandeliers, and my daughter's fiancé would, what? Make his final move? Begin the process of my carefully planned demise? I touched Margaret's old prescription pad, still in its special drawer, and made a decision. In my office I found my current medication bottles and practiced examining them, pretending to take pills while palming them instead. Margaret had taught me that trick during difficult cases. Sometimes the best defense is letting others think their medicine is working. As the evening shadows lengthened across my pharmacy floor, I heard expensive cars beginning to arrive at the country club across town. German engines purring like satisfied predators, Italian sports cars growling with practiced aggression. I straightened my tie, the new one I'd bought specially for this night, and touched the small photo of Margaret I kept in my wallet. "Watch over me tonight, honey," I whispered. "Something's very wrong with our little girl." I walked toward my trusted old car, its engine as reliable as the morals I'd always kept, ready to play my part in whatever scene James had scripted for this engagement dinner. But in my heart, a voice that sounded like Margaret's kept whispering, "Check the medicine, Robert, check every pill they offer you." The Evergreen Country Club gleamed like a sterile hospital room, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors that made my comfortable pharmacist's shoes feel like intruders. The air carried hints of expensive cologne and aged wine, so different from the honest scents of medicine and alcohol swabs that marked my daily life. James's family had reserved the grand ballroom, filling it with doctors wearing watches worth more than a year's worth of prescriptions. I spotted Sarah near the center table, wearing a designer dress that made her look like a stranger. The moment I stepped through the doorway, conversation stuttered to silence. James, resplendent in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly inventory, turned toward me with a smile that reminded me of certain pain medications, designed to mask something deadly. "Everyone," he announced, his voice carrying across the marble floors like a lethal injection. The local pharmacist finally arrived. I suppose we should be grateful he left his pill-counting tray at home. The room froze, wine glasses paused midway to lips as his words echoed off expensive walls. Then someone snickered, a soft sound that spread like an adverse reaction, igniting quiet laughter around the room. Sarah stood motionless, her face unreadable as James continued his performance. "Robert, I took the liberty of having the kitchen prepare something special for you. A signature cocktail mixed just the way a pharmacist would appreciate." More laughter now, bolder, encouraged by his theatrical cruelty. His father, standing near the head table, raised his wine glass in mock salute. "To proper dosing," he smirked. "May tonight's medicine work quickly." The medical bag in my pocket felt heavy as lead, the check beside it burning like acid against my chest. James glided toward me, his designer shoes clicking on marble like a timer counting down. "Here, Robert, your special drink. I insist." He reached out, offering a crystal glass filled with dark liquid, his eyes watching me with the focus of a surgeon selecting his instruments. I noticed Sarah's slight nod to him, a signal as clear as a prescription signature. The room continued laughing, crystal glasses tinkling like vials in a cabinet, as I pretended to take a sip. Through the glass, I saw the undissolved powder at the bottom, exactly where an improperly mixed medication would settle. The county medical examiner, positioned conveniently near the exit, checked his watch with practiced indifference. James's brother, a toxicologist, stood ready by the house phone, no doubt prepared to call for emergency services that would arrive just a bit too late. But what broke my heart wasn't their careful planning, it was Sarah's face. My daughter, who had once helped me measure life-saving medications, now watched me with the detached interest of someone observing a clinical trial. The room swirled with expensive fabrics and predatory stares, but suddenly none of it touched me. The glass in my hand felt like every poison prescription I'd caught and corrected over 40 years of practice. James's brother raised his voice above the general murmur. Perhaps we should move closer to the stairs. I hear the view from the bottom is breathtaking. More laughter, more raised glasses, more smirks from people who thought they were witnessing the beginning of my end. I set the untouched glass on a nearby table, my pharmacist's hands steady from decades of handling dangerous substances. Behind me, James's voice carried one final barb. Don't worry, Sarah. By tomorrow morning, all your financial worries will be over. Some accidents are just inevitable. The night air hit my face like pure oxygen as I stepped outside. In my car, I sat watching the country club's golden lights illuminate the wealthy crowd through floor-to-ceiling windows. My daughter remained inside, playing her part in a plot she thought was perfectly formulated. The medical bag stayed in my pocket, Margaret's final gift waiting for a moment they couldn't taint. As I started my car's engine, its faithful rumble drowning out the echoes of cruel laughter, something inside me shifted like a chemical reaction reaching its endpoint. The father who would forgive anything for his daughter's love died in that seat. In his place sat a man who finally understood. Sometimes the truest act of love is recognizing when your own child has prescribed your death. I drove away from the Evergreen Country Club, leaving behind not just an engagement dinner, but a lifetime of making excuses for people who had traded their medical oaths for murder plots. Tomorrow, I would begin my own careful preparation, not of medicine but of evidence. And for the first time in years, I felt Margaret's presence beside me, nodding in approval as I escaped what would have been my last supper. I drove home in complete silence, the familiar hum of my car's engine matching the pounding of my heart. The house stood dark and threatening, knowing James and Sarah had a key. I hadn't even removed my jacket when I noticed the basement door slightly ajar. Something drew me down those stairs, the same stairs they had planned would be my last descent. Behind the loose bricks where I kept old pharmacy records, I found James's leather-bound diary, its pages filled with his meticulous handwriting. But next to it, wrapped in faded hospital linens, lay something I had completely forgotten. Margaret's final case files from her years as a hospital investigator. My hands trembled as I opened the weathered manila envelope, its edges worn smooth from years of protecting its explosive contents. Inside, protected by clear plastic sleeves, lay documents that made my pharmacist's heart stop. Detailed records of James Morrison's previous medical fraud cases, complete with dates, witness statements and evidence of 2 other accidental deaths involving insurance policies. Margaret's neat handwriting covered the margins with dates, connections and notes. A letter, written in her familiar script, explained everything. My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, someone has finally discovered your value as a target. During my last months in the hospital, I investigated a young doctor named James Morrison. 2 elderly patients with large insurance policies died under his care. I could never prove it, but I kept every record, every detail, knowing someday this evidence might save another life. I spread the papers across my basement workbench, reading through medical terminology that suddenly felt like poetry. James's diary provided the final pieces, his own words documenting every step of his plan to murder me. The insurance policy, the medication tampering, the planned accident, all recorded in his precise doctor's script, matching perfectly with Margaret's investigation from years ago. My wife hadn't just left me case files, she'd left me the exact evidence needed to expose a serial killer hiding behind a medical license. Her letter continued, I never told you because I wanted to protect you from worrying. But if anyone ever tries to harm you, these papers are your shield and antidote. The documents showed a pattern. James targeted wealthy medical professionals, married into their families, then orchestrated their deaths through seemingly natural causes or accidents. His current diary entries read like a confession, detailing every step of my planned demise. The night air carried the scent of old paper and justice as I read through years of investigative notes, each page revealing deeper layers of premeditated evil. James's mockery at the country club, Sarah's complicity in the insurance scheme, even their rush to schedule the wedding. It had all been part of a deadly prescription written long before they met. In the distance, I heard cars returning from the country club, probably my daughter and her murderous fiancé still celebrating what they thought was the beginning of my end. The medical bag sat forgotten in my pocket as something harder, colder, and more powerful took shape in my hands. Margaret hadn't just left me evidence. She'd left me the perfect cure for James Morrison's particular brand of poison. I carefully returned the documents to their hiding place, but kept one page out, a single sheet showing James's signature on a previous victim's insurance policy, matching perfectly with his diary's handwriting. The paper was just ink and medical records, but in my hands it felt like a perfectly measured dose of justice, ready to stop a killer's heart with one precise injection of truth. As the first light of dawn painted my basement in shades of warning red, I called Tom Chin, my oldest friend and a former FDA prosecutor who had helped Margaret investigate medical fraud for 30 years. "Come now," I said simply. "Margaret's files are open." Those words were all he needed. We discussed this possibility years ago in quiet conversations after Margaret's passing. Tom arrived just as I finished photographing every page of James's diary, his experienced eyes scanning my basement for signs of tampering. We gathered around my workbench, coffee steaming in Margaret's old hospital mugs, while I laid out what I'd discovered. "James has killed before," I said, spreading the evidence across the surface. "Two elderly doctors, both with large insurance policies, both with accidental deaths. Margaret tracked him years ago but couldn't prove it. Now his own diary confirms everything." Tom's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the files, his expression shifting from professional interest to predatory satisfaction. "Your wife was brilliant," he said, fingers tracing the connection between past cases and current plans. "She built a perfect trap, just waiting for him to walk into it." Tom's laptop hummed as he pulled up criminal statutes. "This is beautiful," he murmured. "James's diary doesn't just document his plan to kill you, it references his previous victims. The insurance policies, the medication tampering, the staged accidents, it's all here in his own handwriting." He outlined our strategy. First, an emergency meeting with the FBI's medical fraud unit, followed by a full investigation into James's past cases. "By noon tomorrow, every hospital he's worked at will be under scrutiny," he promised. "By dinner, his medical license will be suspended." I added Margaret's findings, showing how James had moved from state to state, changing names slightly each time. "The pattern is identical," Tom confirmed. "He finds wealthy medical professionals, marries into their families, takes out insurance policies, then stages fatal accidents. But he's never left such clear evidence before." Tom began preparing legal documents, his printer humming like a heart monitor. "Robert," he said, looking up from his work, "you realize this isn't just about stopping your murder. With these records, we can reopen every suspicious death, every insurance claim, every case Margaret investigated. We're talking multiple homicide charges, federal fraud indictments, complete destruction of his medical career." The numbers of potential victims hung in the air like toxic fumes, but it wasn't the quantity that made me smile. It was knowing that Margaret, my brilliant, thorough Margaret, had seen this coming. She'd gathered every piece of evidence, every connection, every detail, knowing that someday it would save not just my life, but potentially many others. Tom's printer produced the final affidavits with a satisfying finality. "The FBI agents will be here within the hour," he said. "They'll want to place surveillance on your house, monitor James's movements. We need to let him think his plan is still working." I nodded, feeling the same certainty I'd felt when catching dangerous drug interactions before they could harm my patients. "Let him keep writing in his diary," I said. "Every new entry is another nail in his coffin." I stood at my basement window, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood where I'd trusted my daughter with my life. Margaret's files lay ready for battle, each page representing a different kind of medicine, the kind that cures evil with truth. Tom's printer produced the final documents with a satisfying finality. "Ready to sign?" he asked, holding out his pen. I took it, feeling the same certainty I'd felt when signing my first pharmacy license decades ago. Some signatures save lives and some signatures end killers' careers. This one would do both. The FBI moved faster than any prescription I'd ever filled. By 9 in the morning, Federal agents had copied every page of James's diary and Margaret's files. Special Agent Lisa Torres sat in my pharmacy office, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights as she made the calls that would freeze every account connected to James Morrison and his previous victims' insurance payouts. "Time to show our hand," she said, nodding to Tom Chin. At exactly 10 o'clock, when James would be starting his morning surgeries, simultaneous legal notices hit every hospital where he had worked. The state medical board received evidence of his past crimes, and his current hospital's chief of staff got a detailed report of medication tampering. I watched from my security cameras as federal agents entered his clinic, warrant in hand, while others delivered court orders to freeze Sarah's accounts, the one she'd opened jointly with James to handle my accident insurance payout. The first panicked call came at 10:30. Sarah's voice trembled on my answering machine, all her sophisticated polish cracking like cheap medicine capsules. "Dad, what's happening?" "James's medical license is suspended. The hospital security just escorted him out. Our accounts are frozen. Please, you have to help us." More calls followed, each one more desperate than the last. James's voice joined the chorus by 11, his smooth doctor's tone replaced by raw fear. "Robert, we can explain everything. Those diary entries, they're just creative writing exercises. The insurance policy was for your protection." I sat in my pharmacy, checking inventory like any normal day, while Tom played me recordings from the FBI surveillance. James was calling everyone: lawyers, hospital administrators, even his old victims' families. But Margaret's evidence had closed every door. By afternoon, local news vans parked outside James's clinic. Prominent neurosurgeon linked to multiple deaths scrolled across screens throughout the city. His brother, the toxicologist who had laughed about my accident, was now facing his own investigation. Sarah's plastic surgery patients were canceling appointments, her carefully built reputation dissolving like a bitter pill. More messages filled my phone. "Daddy, please, I didn't know about the other murders. James told me the insurance was normal for medical families. Call me back." But I continued my work, filling prescriptions, counseling patients, letting justice do its job. Agent Torres kept me updated. 3 more families had come forward, recognizing James's method from their own loved ones' suspicious deaths. His entire criminal enterprise was crumbling faster than cheap aspirin in water. The final blow came at sunset. Tom Chin called to tell me the FBI had found James's offshore accounts, filled with money from his previous victims' insurance policies. "He's looking at multiple life sentences," Tom said. "The evidence Margaret gathered, it's perfect." She knew exactly what to document. I stood at my pharmacy window, watching the last sunlight fade while my phone buzzed with Sarah's 20th desperate call. In the growing darkness, I remembered teaching her about medicine's first rule: do no harm. She had forgotten that lesson, choosing instead to help plot her own father's death. Now she was learning a different kind of medicine, the kind that cures greed with consequences. I turned off my phone, locked up the pharmacy, and drove home to my quiet house. For the first time since the country club dinner, I felt truly safe. Margaret's files had done more than save my life. They had administered perfect justice, one documented crime at a time. As I sat in my favorite chair, holding her picture, the silence felt like victory. No more fake smiles, no more hidden poison, no more pretending I didn't know about their deadly prescription. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, the best revenge is letting the truth work its medicine. The morning after justice struck, I packed a small suitcase with basic clothes and Margaret's favorite photo. Agent Torres had assured me the investigation would continue smoothly without my presence, and Tom Chin promised to manage the legal proceedings. I left a simple note on my pharmacy door: "Gone fishing, like Margaret always wanted." It was the kind of message that meant nothing to strangers but would speak volumes to Sarah. Her mother had always dreamed of us retiring to a quiet lakeside cabin in Montana, far from the pressures of medical careers and social climbing. I had bought that cabin 15 years ago, keeping it as a secret retreat, telling no one except my trusted pharmacy manager about its existence. Now, as dawn painted the sky in shades of freedom, I drove away from the city that had witnessed my near destruction. The journey to Montana felt like slowly releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. Each mile added distance between me and the chaos I'd left behind: the federal investigation, the media circus surrounding James's crimes, Sarah's desperate attempts to contact me. The highway stretched ahead like a clean prescription pad, ready for me to write a new chapter. My old truck, the one James had mocked as beneath a medical professional, carried me faithfully through state after state. I stopped at small-town diners, enjoying simple meals without worrying about social appearances or hidden agendas. The further I drove from my old life, the lighter my heart felt, as if altitude and distance were the perfect cure for betrayal. The cabin appeared exactly as Margaret had imagined it. Pine walls weathered by mountain winds, a wraparound porch facing the crystal-clear lake, and absolute silence except for nature's music. No cell phone signals reached this sanctuary, no urgent medical calls, no desperate messages from daughter or son-in-law. I unpacked my few belongings, placing Margaret's photo on the mantel where morning sunlight could touch her smile. The cabin's previous owner, an old forest ranger, had left his fishing gear hanging on the porch. I remembered Margaret's voice. "Someday, Robert, you'll learn that the best medicine isn't in bottles, it's in moments of pure peace." She was right as always. That first evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching trout jump in the lake while sunset painted the mountains gold. Local news reached the cabin a week later through the small general store 5 miles down the mountain. The store owner, Jenny, saved newspapers for me without asking questions. The headlines told a story of unraveling lives. Surgeon's murder plot exposes insurance fraud ring, multiple families seek justice in medical murders, prominent doctor faces life sentence. One small article mentioned Sarah filing for divorce, her plastic surgery practice closing after patients fled. The chaos I'd left behind was still exploding, but here in my mountain sanctuary, those problems felt as distant as stars. I spent my days learning to fish, reading books Margaret had loved, and healing in the way only nature allows. Sometimes, hiking along crystal-clear streams, I imagined her walking beside me, approving of this peaceful revenge, letting the guilty face their fate while I found my freedom. Jenny from the store became my only connection to the outside world, bringing weekly supplies and newspapers without prying into my story. "Some folks come to the mountains to find something," she said once, "others come to leave something behind. Either way, the mountains keep their secrets." She was right. While James faced federal prosecutors and Sarah dealt with social disgrace, I found a different kind of justice in mountain sunrises and quiet afternoons. My note about gone fishing had been more than a message, it was a declaration of independence from their toxic world. Here, surrounded by ancient trees and honest silence, I discovered that the best revenge wasn't in watching their destruction. It was in finding my peace while their carefully planned world crumbled into chaos. 3 months into my mountain retreat, Jenny brought more than just supplies. She carried a thick envelope from Tom Chin. Inside, newspaper clippings and legal documents told the story of James Morrison's spectacular fall. The federal trial had revealed everything. 7 murdered victims across 5 states, millions in stolen insurance money, and a network of corrupt medical professionals who had helped hide his crimes. The prosecution used Margaret's meticulous files to trace every death, every fraudulent policy, every tampered medication. James's perfect facade cracked under questioning. He tried blaming his brother, then Sarah, then even his previous victims, but Margaret's evidence proved him the mastermind. The jury took only 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts. The judge, herself a former medical professional, sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Sarah's downfall played out in the society pages she had once dominated. Her divorce filing claimed James had deceived and manipulated her, but photos from the country club dinner surfaced, showing her watching me drink what she knew was poisoned wine. Former patients came forward with stories of overcharging and unnecessary procedures, triggering a state medical board investigation. Her designer clothes went to consignment shops, her luxury car repossessed, her reputation shredded by social media posts calling her the killer doctor's accomplice. The plastic surgery practice she'd been so proud of shut down after losing its insurance coverage. Even her country club membership was revoked, the final social death sentence in her world. Tom's letter mentioned she'd moved back to her old apartment above a discount store, the same one she'd once called embarrassingly common. The FBI's financial investigation hit them hardest. Every account James had hidden, every insurance payout he'd collected, every property bought with blood money, all seized and frozen. Sarah's joint accounts, including the one meant to hold my life insurance payout, vanished overnight. The luxury lifestyle she'd chosen over family loyalty evaporated like ether. James's brother lost his medical license for helping falsify death certificates. Their entire network of corrupt doctors, insurance agents, and medical examiners faced criminal charges. Margaret's evidence had triggered a domino effect, toppling careers and reputations across the medical community. The newspapers called it the Morrison medical murders, but locals nicknamed it the pharmacist's revenge, though I'd done nothing but let truth be the strongest medicine. Jenny brought fresh news each week, her quiet updates becoming a ritual over morning coffee on my porch. James attempted suicide in prison, using smuggled pills, ironic justice for someone who'd weaponized medication against others. Sarah lost her medical license after the board found evidence she'd known about previous murders. Their perfect world hadn't just cracked, it had shattered into unsalvageable pieces. From my peaceful mountain view, watching trout jump in the crystal lake, their destruction felt like watching a poisonous plant finally wither. Tom's latest letter confirmed the federal government would use seized assets to compensate victims' families. Margaret's files had done more than expose crimes, they'd brought healing to grieving families across multiple states. The final piece of news arrived with the first mountain snow. Sarah had been spotted at my old pharmacy, begging my staff for information about my location. She left tear-stained letters filled with apologies and promises of change. James sent a confession through his prison chaplain, admitting everything and asking forgiveness. Their messages carried the desperate tone of people who had lost everything and finally understood the true cost of their choices. As I sat on my cabin porch that evening watching snowflakes dance in the pure mountain air, my phone received its first signal in months. One message from an unknown number: "Dad, please. We know what we did. Just tell us how to make it right." But I smiled, turned off the phone, and watched the sunset paint the snow-covered peaks in shades of perfect peace. Some prescriptions can't be refilled, some damages can't be repaired, and some betrayals are best answered with silence. After 6 months of mountain solitude, Tom Chen's call broke my peaceful routine. "James has terminal cancer," he explained. "Prison doctors give him 3 months. Sarah's been calling every law firm in the state, trying to arrange a meeting. They want to confess everything, Robert. Face to face." I sat on my cabin porch, watching eagles circle the lake, considering how life sometimes writes its own prescriptions for justice. Jenny brought me a certified letter from the prison warden, confirming James's condition and his request for a final meeting. Sarah had attached a handwritten note, her once perfect handwriting now shaky: "Please, Dad. Let us try to make peace before it's too late." After a week of quiet reflection, watching the mountains change colors with autumn's arrival, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, the state prison's supervised visiting room. The prison looked exactly like the sterile, cold world James and Sarah had tried to build around me. Agent Torres arranged everything, ensuring my safety and comfort. I wore my old pharmacist's coat, the simple white garment that had once embarrassed them at social functions. The visiting room felt like a hospital waiting area, all hard plastic chairs and fluorescent lights. Sarah entered first and I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and sophisticated makeup. She wore discount store jeans and a plain sweater, her face bare and lined with months of stress. Her plastic surgery practice's failure had left her working as a medical records clerk in a small clinic. When she saw me, her practiced poise crumbled. "Daddy," she whispered, the word catching in her throat like a bitter pill. James shuffled in wearing orange prison scrubs, handcuffed and looking nothing like the arrogant surgeon who had once mocked my community pharmacy. Cancer had stolen his polished appearance, leaving him gaunt and gray. The prison guards helped him sit, his doctor's hands trembling as he tried to meet my gaze. "Robert," he started, his voice barely audible, "I don't expect forgiveness. But before I die, you need to know everything." For the next hour they poured out confessions like medicine from broken bottles. James admitted to every murder, every stolen dollar, every manipulated death certificate. Sarah revealed how he had gradually poisoned her mind against me, using her ambition and social climbing desires as weapons. They described the country club dinner in detail, the poisoned drink, the planned accident, the insurance paperwork already prepared. Their tears flowed freely as they spoke about discovering Margaret's files had exposed everything. "Your wife," James said, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. "She was investigating me years before I even met Sarah. Every detail, every connection. She built the perfect case from beyond the grave." Sarah couldn't stop crying as she described losing everything: her practice, her reputation, her self-respect. "The worst part wasn't the money or the social disgrace," she sobbed. "It was realizing I had become someone who could watch her own father being poisoned. Someone Mom would have been ashamed of." The fluorescent lights buzzed above us like angry witnesses as they begged for a chance to make amends. James talked about his cancer as divine justice, while Sarah promised to spend her life trying to rebuild what they had destroyed. The prison guards kept checking their watches, reminding us that visiting hours were ending. James's handcuffs clinked against the metal table as he made his final plea: "I'll be dead soon, Robert. My crimes will die with me. But Sarah, she needs her father. not for money or status, but for the kind of healing only family can provide. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of touching my pharmacist's coat. Dad, please. I know I don't deserve another chance. But Mom always said everyone deserves access to medicine that heals. Maybe forgiveness is that kind of medicine? The guard stepped forward, indicating our time was up. James would return to the prison hospital, where karma had prescribed him a taste of the suffering he'd inflicted on others. Sarah would go back to her small apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. They both looked at me with desperate hope, waiting for my response. I sat there in my simple white coat, feeling the weight of Margaret's wisdom and the power of true justice. The silence stretched between us like a prescription waiting to be filled. I took a deep breath, the same way I did before measuring dangerous medications, and spoke with the calm authority I'd developed over 40 years of pharmacy work. Forgiveness isn't like an antibiotic, I began, watching their desperate faces. You can't just take one dose and expect everything to heal. It requires time, consistent effort, and proof that the infection of greed and betrayal has truly been cured. Sarah's hands trembled on the prison table as I outlined my conditions. First, she would need to volunteer at my original pharmacy location, working without pay, helping the elderly patients she'd once considered beneath her. Not as a doctor but as a basic assistant, learning humility and service. James nodded weakly from his prison wheelchair, understanding that his part in this healing process would be accepting his fate and spending his final days writing letters to his victims' families, telling them the complete truth about their loved ones' deaths. My second requirement focused on actions, not words. Sarah would need to live within her means, keeping her job as a medical records clerk, staying in her modest apartment. No more social climbing, no more country club memberships, no more chasing status. You'll join me in serving Thanksgiving dinner at the homeless shelter, I stated firmly. Christmas mornings will be spent delivering medications to homebound patients. Every Sunday you'll help count pills and organize prescriptions for low-income families. The guard shifted uncomfortably as Sarah wiped tears from her face, but I continued. You'll write a monthly letter to your mother's grave, reading it aloud at the cemetery, detailing your progress in becoming the daughter she raised you to be. Each letter gets copied to me not for control but for accountability. The fluorescent lights hummed as I laid out the final boundaries. There would be no requests for money, no attempts to access the pharmacy's accounts, no trying to rebuild her medical career through my connections. Your path back to family, I explained, runs through service to others, not through social status or financial gain. James coughed weakly in his prison scrubs, looking like a ghost of his former arrogant self. She'll do everything you ask, Robert, he whispered. I've taught her all the wrong lessons about success. Maybe you can teach her the right ones before I'm gone. Sarah reached for a tissue, her designer watch long since sold to pay legal fees. Dad, she said quietly, I'll follow every rule. Not because I have to, but because I finally understand what Mom and you tried to teach me about real medicine. It's not about status or money. It's about helping people heal. The prison guard signaled our time was ending. I stood up, straightening my pharmacist's coat, and delivered my final prescription for redemption. One mistake, one return to old habits, one sign of manipulation, and this chance expires. Like a controlled substance, forgiveness comes with strict regulations. Sarah nodded, her face showing genuine understanding for the first time since this nightmare began. James slumped in his wheelchair, the cancer making him look smaller by the minute. You're a better man than I ever was, Robert, he said softly. Sarah, listen to your father. He knows the true meaning of healing. As the guards prepared to lead them away, Sarah looked at me with new eyes, not the entitled daughter who had helped plot my death, but someone beginning to understand the real value of family medicine. I accept all conditions, Dad, she said firmly. Not because I have to, but because it's the right prescription for healing what I broke. The prison door closed behind them with a heavy click, leaving me alone with the weight of conditional forgiveness and the hope that sometimes, even the deepest wounds can heal under proper care. 1 year passed like medicine slowly healing a deep wound. James died in prison 3 months after our meeting, his final letters to victims' families providing closure many had waited years to receive. Sarah kept every condition of our agreement, working through holidays and weekends at my original pharmacy. I watched from a distance as she learned to count pills with the same care her mother once showed, helping elderly customers understand their medications without a trace of her former superiority. The designer clothes stayed in storage, replaced by simple scrubs and comfortable shoes. Her hands, once manicured for plastic surgery, now sorted prescriptions and carried medication boxes to homebound patients' cars. The transformation wasn't instant, but like a well-prescribed treatment, it showed steady progress. Christmas morning found us in the pharmacy's back room, preparing deliveries for patients who couldn't leave their homes. Sarah wore the same kind of white coat she had once mocked, her name tag simply reading pharmacy assistant, instead of Dr. Morrison. As we sorted medications into bags, she told me about her latest letter to Margaret's grave. I told Mom about Mrs. Johnson, remember her? The one who couldn't afford her heart medicine? I helped her apply for the assistance program you started years ago. She cried and hugged me, Dad. Not because I was a doctor, but because I cared enough to help. The morning light filtered through amber prescription bottles, casting warm shadows across her face as she worked. No makeup, no pretense, just honest effort and growing understanding. When our regular customers came in, they greeted her by name, not title, and she smiled genuinely at each one. That evening, we shared a simple dinner in my pharmacy office, eating turkey sandwiches while reviewing patient files. Sarah pointed out potential drug interactions with the same attention to detail Margaret had taught me decades ago. I finally understand why you chose this life, Dad, she said quietly. It's not about prestige or money. It's about being there when people need help. Her eyes filled with tears as she touched the photo of Margaret on my desk. Mom would be proud of you for giving me this chance to learn what real medicine means. As we finished our modest holiday meal, a customer knocked on the closed pharmacy door, an elderly man who had run out of insulin. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her coat, ready to help. Watching her assist him with genuine care, I felt something shift in my heart. Not complete forgiveness yet, but a cautious acceptance that sometimes, the best medicine takes time to work, and healing comes in small, steady doses of changed behavior. Looking back on this journey from my pharmacy office, where I still fill prescriptions and help people heal, I've learned that betrayal and redemption follow the same rules as medicine. Every poison has its antidote, every wound its proper treatment, and every broken trust its own timeline for recovery. Margaret knew this when she left those files behind, not just to save my life, but to teach our daughter the true meaning of healing. James's diary revealed the darkness money and status can breed in human hearts, while my wife's evidence showed how truth, carefully preserved, becomes the strongest medicine of all. Sarah's transformation from a status-obsessed surgeon to a humble pharmacy assistant proved that sometimes, losing everything helps us find what really matters. The most powerful lesson wasn't in exposing James's crimes or watching their perfect world crumble. It came in understanding that real strength lies in choosing how we respond to betrayal. I could have let anger poison my heart or revenge consume my days. Instead, I followed Margaret's example, using truth as medicine and service as healing. Today, Sarah helps run our community assistance programs, making sure everyone can afford their prescriptions. The designer clothes and country club memberships are distant memories, replaced by the genuine satisfaction of making a difference in people's lives. Our story isn't just about a murder plot discovered or justice served. It's about how forgiveness, like medicine, must be carefully measured and administered with wisdom. If you're watching this and facing betrayal in your own life, remember, healing takes time, truth is the best medicine, and sometimes second chances come with strict dosing instructions. The power to change your story lies not in revenge, but in choosing a path that heals both yourself and others. Like and subscribe if this story touched your heart, and share where you're watching from in the comments below. Let's build a community that understands the true meaning of healing and forgiveness. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt us, it's showing them a better way to live. This is the Chronicler, reminding you that every story of betrayal can become a lesson in healing, if we're wise enough to fill the prescription life writes for us.